The heavy iron door of the maximum security wing at the Oak Creek Animal Shelter did not just swing open. It groaned with a weight that felt like a warning. Behind the bars of the very last kennel sat a creature that looked more like a myth than a dog. He was a 185-pound Rottweiler named Silas, a mountain of black and tan fur with eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of disappointment. The sign on his gate was not like the others. It was bright red and carried a single, chilling word: aggressive. The shelter manager gripped her clipboard tight, her knuckles white, as she whispered that Silas was too far gone. He was a liability, a beast that had forgotten how to be a friend. But as Elias and Clara stood before that cage, they did not see a monster. They saw a soul that had been silenced by the world. They were about to make a decision that everyone said was a mistake, a choice that would lead to a moment no one could have predicted when they finally brought their newborn baby home. Elias was a man who understood what it felt like to be overlooked. A quiet carpenter by trade, he spent his days turning broken wood into something beautiful, finding the hidden potential in things others threw away. His wife, Clara, was a kindergarten teacher with a heart that had enough room for the entire world. They had been married for 5 years and were finally expecting their first child, a dream they had held onto through seasons of waiting. Despite the joy of the pregnancy, there was a quiet void in their home. Elias had grown up with dogs that were his only companions during a lonely childhood, and he felt that a home was not truly a home without a beating heart at his feet. They did not want a perfect puppy from a breeder. They wanted to save a life that no one else would touch. This desire brought them to Silas. While other families laughed with golden retrievers, Elias and Clara were drawn to the dog that the world had labeled a lost cause. They saw Silas's isolation as a reflection of their own past struggles, creating a deep, immediate empathy for the giant animal who sat in the shadows, waiting for a miracle. The moment Elias locked eyes with Silas, the air in the shelter seemed to grow still. The shelter manager, a weary woman named Sarah, stood back and warned them again. She explained that Silas had been returned 3 times because he would not stop growling at men. He was too big to handle and too angry to trust. But when Elias knelt down, ignoring the protocols and the fear in Sarah's voice, something shifted. Silas did not lunge. He did not bark. Instead, the massive dog stood up slowly, his heavy paws thumping against the concrete, and walked toward the bars. He stopped just inches from Elias's hand. There was a low, vibrating rumble in his chest, but it was not a threat. It was a question. For the first time in years, someone was looking at Silas without flinching. Elias reached out, his fingers trembling slightly, and touched the tip of the dog's wet nose through the cold metal. Silas closed his eyes and exhaled a breath that sounded like a sob. In that silent exchange, the deal was sealed. Silas was going home. The files on Silas were thin, but the stories behind them were heavy. He had once belonged to a man named Marcus, a person who did not want a companion, but a weapon. Marcus had kept Silas in a cramped, dark garage for the first 3 years of his life, training him to be a guard dog through fear and pain. Silas was never given a toy to play with or a soft bed to sleep on. He was only given commands and heavy chains. When Marcus was eventually arrested, Silas was found guarding an empty house, starving and terrified, refusing to let the rescuers near him because he thought his job was to protect the very person who had hurt him. He was aggressive because he had been taught that the world was a battlefield. He growled because he did not know how to speak the language of love. The trauma had settled into his bones, making him wary of every hand that reached toward him. He had spent years being punished for his size and his strength, and he had eventually learned to hide his heart behind a wall of black fur and bared teeth. Silas was not born mean. He was made that way by a world that only valued his bite. The first month in the house was a dance of shadows and silence. Silas took up residence in the corner of the living room, a massive black shape that watched every move Elias and Clara made. Elias was patient. He did not force Silas to come to him. Instead, he would sit on the floor 10 feet away and read out loud from his carpentry manuals, letting the dog get used to the steady, calm rhythm of his voice. Every meal was a bridge. Clara would place the bowl down and stay in the room, showing Silas that food was no longer a reward for aggression, but a gift of care. There were setbacks. A loud thunderclap one night sent Silas into a defensive panic, where he paced the halls with a terrifying growl that echoed through the house. But instead of shouting, Elias simply sat in the hallway with a flashlight and waited until the dog calmed down. Slowly, the walls began to crumble. One evening, as Elias was sanding a piece of oak, Silas walked over and rested his massive head on Elias's knee. It was the first time the dog had initiated contact. As Clara's belly grew with the coming baby, Silas seemed to sense a change in the atmosphere. He began to follow her from room to room, his pace matching her slow movements. He was learning that hands were for stroking, not hitting, and that a home was a place where he no longer had to be a soldier. The tension returned the day they brought baby Julian home from the hospital. The warnings from the shelter echoed in Clara's mind as they stepped through the front door. Everyone had told them that a 185-pound dog with a history of violence had no place near a newborn. Elias held the car seat firmly, his heart hammering against his ribs. Silas was waiting in the foyer, his ears perked and his body tense. The giant dog sniffed the air, catching the scent of the new, fragile life. He walked forward, his heavy claws clicking on the hardwood floor. Clara held her breath, her hand hovering near the baby's head. Silas stopped in front of the car seat and looked down at Julian, who was wrapped in a blue blanket. For a heartbeat, there was total silence. Then, Silas did something that moved Elias to tears. He did not growl, he did not lunge. He let out a soft whimpering sound and began to lick his own paws, a sign of extreme submission and gentleness. Then, very carefully, he lowered his massive head until his nose was just an inch away from the baby's tiny hand. He took a long, deep sniff, then gave the baby's foot a single, lightning-fast lick before stepping back and sitting down with his head held high. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was taking his post. The aggressive beast had recognized the innocence of the child and, in that moment, he became the ultimate protector. The dog who had once been trained to hurt had chosen to heal. A year has passed since that afternoon, and the house is no longer a place of silence, but of laughter. Silas is no longer the dog from the red-labeled kennel. He is Julian's best friend and shadow. When the toddler takes his first wobbly steps, he reaches out for Silas's thick fur to steady himself, and the giant dog stands as still as a statue, providing the support the boy needs. At night, Silas does not sleep in the living room. He lies across the doorway of the nursery, a silent, powerful guardian who ensures that nothing disturbs the baby's rest. The world still sees a scary Rottweiler when they walk down the street, but Elias and Clara only see the miracle of a second chance. Silas was saved by a family, but in the end, it was Silas who showed them the true meaning of loyalty and the power of an open heart.